On the distant planet of Xylar, the sky shimmered with colors that humans had never seen. Two suns hung low on the horizon, casting soft light across the towering crystalline spires of the alien queen's palace. The air buzzed faintly with energy, a mixture of technology and the planet's natural aura. Soldiers moved quickly along the corridors, their steps precise, their faces set with serious expressions. It was a day of tension, for the queen had called her advisors urgently that morning. Inside the main chamber, the alien queen sat on her throne, tall and regal. Her skin a smooth shade of violet that gleamed under the light. Her hair, long and silver, fell like a river over her shoulders. Around her, her advisors whispered anxiously, each one aware of the events that had unfolded recently. The queen herself had been quiet, her large eyes scanning the room with a mix of authority and unease. The reason for the tension was not political. It was personal. The queen had given birth to her first child, a tiny girl, only hours before, but the baby cried constantly. No one, not even the most skilled royal nurses, could soothe her. Her wails echoed through the palace, sharp and insistent, and the queen's heart ached at every sound. She had hoped that her daughter's first hours would be filled with calm and joy, but instead the child seemed unsettled, almost frightened, as if she sensed the chaos around her. "Nothing works," one of the senior nurses said quietly, wringing her hands. She had tried rocking, singing, even the gentle hum of the palace's energy fields, but the baby's cries only grew louder. The queen rose from her throne, her movement smooth and measured despite her worry. "Bring her here," she commanded, her voice steady but tinged with concern. The nurses quickly complied, placing the infant in a soft cradle made of shimmering fibers. The baby's tiny fists waved in the air as her cries filled the chamber. The queen knelt beside the cradle, her long fingers hovering over the baby's delicate form. She spoke softly in a voice meant to comfort. "Hush now, my little one. Mother is here." But the baby only cried harder, her tiny body trembling with each sob. The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. She had ruled over planets and commanded armies, but this, the helplessness of a child, was something she had never faced before. Outside the chamber, a human soldier named James watched from a distance. He had been stationed on Xylar for several weeks as part of a peacekeeping mission between human and alien forces. James was trained for combat, for survival in hostile environments, but this was a different world entirely. The palace was unlike anything he had ever seen. Soaring halls of crystal, floating platforms, and corridors lined with intricate designs that glowed faintly with natural energy. James had been careful not to draw attention to himself. Humans were rare here, and their presence often drew suspicion, but today something caught his attention, something that made him pause. The infant's cries were piercing, and the air seemed to shift around her. The soldiers and nurses appeared tense, as if afraid that their failure to soothe her might anger the queen herself. Curiosity drew James closer. He had worked with children before on Earth and during his missions, and he knew that sometimes the simplest approach worked best. Patience, calm presence, and gentle touch could do what the most advanced technology could not. Still, he kept his distance, uncertain whether the queen or her court would welcome his interference. Minutes passed, and the baby's cries continued unabated. The queen's advisors exchanged worried glances. One of them, a tall alien with eyes like amber flames, spoke quietly to the queen. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider other options." "Nothing we try is working." The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She had never been someone to give up easily. "Bring him in," she said suddenly, her voice carrying across the room. Everyone froze. "Who?" asked one of the nurses, confused. "The human soldier," the queen replied, her eyes sharp. "Let him try. Perhaps his presence is what my child needs." The chamber was silent for a moment. Humans were not usually allowed so close to the royal family, and many of the advisors looked uneasy. But the queen's command was absolute. James was startled when the guards escorted him into the chamber. He bowed slightly, showing respect, though his heart pounded. He had no idea what the queen expected him to do. The infant cried even louder as he approached, and he could feel the tension in the room. The queen watched silently, her gaze steady, as if measuring every movement he made. Taking a deep breath, James knelt beside the cradle. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper so that only the baby could hear. "Hey there, little one. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." He extended a hand slowly, letting the baby see his open palm. The baby's eyes, large and bright, fixed on him. Her cries continued, sharp and persistent. James did not rush. He remained calm, steadying his own breathing. He gently swayed his hand in the air, a slow and comforting motion. The baby's cries softened slightly, though she did not stop entirely. The queen leaned forward, her expression tense but curious. Minutes felt like hours. James continued to speak in low, soothing tones, letting his presence be steady and predictable. He knew from experience that children often responded not to words but to the energy around them, the sense of safety and calm. Slowly, the baby's tiny body stopped trembling as violently. Her whimpers became intermittent, and her eyes studied James with growing interest. Then, in a moment that seemed almost magical, the baby ceased crying entirely. She reached out a tiny hand, grasping James's finger. The queen's eyes widened in astonishment. She had never seen anything like it. The human soldier, an outsider to her world, had achieved what none of her royal nurses could. He had calmed her child. James held the baby gently, careful not to startle her. He felt a strange warmth, a connection he had never expected. The infant's small head rested against his shoulder, and she let out a soft sigh, her eyes closing in comfort. The queen watched closely, her expression unreadable at first, and then slowly, a smile of relief appeared. "You have done what we could not," the queen said softly, her voice filled with both surprise and gratitude. The court remained silent, watching the unlikely scene unfold. A human, a being so different from their kind, had earned the trust of the queen's most precious treasure. For the first time since her daughter was born, the queen felt a sense of peace. She looked at James, realizing that this soldier was more than just a visitor or a guard. He had shown patience, empathy, and a quiet strength that her people respected deeply. As the baby rested in James's arms, the queen spoke again, her tone gentle but firm. "You will stay here with her for a time. I want to observe how she responds to your presence." James nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility. He had faced danger in many forms before, but caring for the infant of an alien queen was unlike anything he had ever imagined. He felt both honored and cautious, knowing that the eyes of the entire court were upon him. Outside the chamber, whispers spread quickly. Some were filled with awe, others with doubt. How could a human, a being so different, have such an impact? Yet the truth was undeniable. The baby had calmed, and the queen had noticed. As the suns dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the crystalline floors, the palace seemed quieter, calmer than it had been in hours. The infant slept peacefully in James's arms, and for the first time, the queen allowed herself to relax, but even as she smiled, she could not shake a lingering thought. Why had her child responded only to this human? What was it about his presence that touched her daughter in a way no one else could? And what would it mean for the future, both for her child and for the humans who had come to Xylar? The first day of the infant's life had been filled with uncertainty, cries, and tension. But as night approached, there was hope. The bond between the human soldier and the queen's child had begun, a small spark in a world filled with complexity, danger, and expectation. The queen settled back on her throne, her eyes never leaving the human and her child. She did not yet understand the full significance of this connection. But she knew one thing: her daughter was safe. And for now that was enough, and in that quiet moment, the first step toward a remarkable story began. The day after the queen's child had first been calmed by the human soldier, the palace was unusually quiet. Soldiers moved through the halls with careful steps, whispering to each other about the remarkable event. Word had spread that a human, an outsider, had been able to soothe the baby when no one else could. Some whispered in awe, others in suspicion, but all agreed that it was unusual. James, the human soldier, was already awake before dawn. The palace staff had prepared a quiet room for him near the royal nursery, so he could remain close to the infant without disturbing her sleep. He gently wrapped himself in a soft cloak provided by the royal aides and walked quietly toward the nursery. The hallways were cool and glowing faintly with the energy that ran through the palace walls. It was still early, and only a few palace attendants were awake, glancing at him curiously as he passed. When James entered the nursery, the baby stirred but did not cry. Her eyes, wide and curious, followed him as he approached. She reached out a tiny hand as if she already remembered him from yesterday. The queen, standing just inside the doorway, watched silently. Her expression was cautious but curious. James knelt beside the cradle and spoke softly. "Good morning, little one. Did you sleep well?" His voice was calm and warm, and the baby's small lips curved slightly as if in recognition. The Queen's eyes widened. Even now, after only one day, the baby seemed to respond differently to the human than to anyone else. Over the next hour, James remained with the infant. He held her carefully, letting her rest against his chest, and hummed a gentle tune he remembered from his childhood on Earth. The baby relaxed, her small body pressing close to his, her tiny hands grasping the edge of his uniform. The Queen approached slowly, her long robe whispering against the floor. "It is remarkable," she said softly. "I have never seen her react like this before. Not to her nurses, not to the wisest caretakers in my court. Only to you." James looked up, surprised at the Queen's words. "I don't know why, Your Majesty. I'm just holding her and speaking quietly. Maybe she senses that I am calm, that I am not a threat." The Queen nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "It is more than calm. There is something in the way you are here, soldier. Something different. I have ruled many worlds, seen countless beings, and yet I have never seen a connection like this. Perhaps this is why she has chosen you." James felt a mix of pride and nervousness. He had faced many dangerous situations as a soldier, but being chosen by the infant of an alien queen was something entirely new. He kept his movements slow and careful, aware that any sudden motion might startle her. Over the next few days, James remained near the baby as much as he could. He fed her, held her, and sang quiet songs that had a soothing rhythm. The infant began to anticipate his presence, her eyes brightening whenever he entered the room. She reached out for him, her tiny hands grasping his fingers, her soft coos filling the nursery. The palace staff watched closely. Some were amazed at the bond forming between the human and the child. Others whispered doubts, concerned that an outsider could gain influence over the royal heir. The Queen herself remained silent in her observation, but inside she felt a mix of emotions: pride, relief, and a growing curiosity about this human who had captured her child's trust. One afternoon, while the baby slept peacefully in James's arms, a messenger arrived with urgent news. A rival faction had sent scouts near the planet's border, probing for weaknesses. The palace would need to prepare, and the Queen would have to focus on her responsibilities as a ruler. Yet even in the midst of this tension, she could not tear her eyes away from the human and her child. "James," the Queen said, her voice quiet, "you have calmed my daughter in a way no one else could. I need you to remain here, not just for her safety but for her growth. Can I trust you to care for her while I attend to these matters?" James nodded, his expression serious. "I will protect her, Your Majesty. I will stay with her and ensure she is safe. You have my word." The Queen studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Stay close. Observe her, speak to her, and learn her ways. Perhaps you can teach us something we did not understand about her." In the following days, the bond between James and the infant grew stronger. The baby responded to his presence with laughter, coos, and small gestures of affection. She reached for him when she needed comfort and calmed quickly when he held her. The palace staff began to notice a change as well. The baby's cries had become rare and her general temperament improved. Even the Queen's advisors, who had been skeptical at first, could not deny the positive effect the human had on her child. Yet not everyone in the court was happy. Some members whispered that humans could not be trusted, that they were unpredictable and could influence the royal family in ways that might not be safe. These whispers grew quietly, creating tension beneath the surface of the palace's calm. James remained unaware of most of this. His focus was solely on the child in his care, and he treated her with patience, kindness, and respect. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the palace, the baby became restless. She had been fed and had slept recently, yet she fussed, her tiny fists waving in the air. James noticed immediately and adjusted his approach. He picked her up gently, holding her close to his chest, and whispered softly in a tone meant to comfort. The infant's crying stopped almost immediately. She looked up at James with wide eyes, her small hands touching his face. The Queen, who had been observing from a distance, felt a wave of amazement. How could a being so different from another world entirely have such a calming effect? For the first time, the Queen allowed herself to step closer. "It is extraordinary," she said softly. Do you know what it is about you that she trusts? James shook his head. I don't know, Your Majesty. I just stay calm, speak gently, and hold her carefully. Maybe she senses that I care for her, that I mean no harm. The Queen's eyes softened as she watched the baby resting peacefully in James's arms. Perhaps humans are capable of something rare, something my people have not encountered before. I see now that you possess qualities beyond physical strength. You have empathy, patience, understanding. Perhaps this is why she responds to you. James felt a strange sense of honor. He had fought wars and faced danger, but he had never thought of his ability to calm a child as remarkable. Yet here, on a distant planet, he was learning that simple human qualities could have profound effects, even in worlds far from Earth. Over the next several days, the Queen allowed James to remain close to the child, observing their interactions. He learned quickly how to respond to her moods, how to recognize her needs, and how to make her feel safe. He sang soft songs, rocked her gently, and spoke to her as if she could understand every word. The baby's trust in him deepened with each passing day. Meanwhile, the palace began to adapt to this new reality. The infant's cries, once a source of stress and anxiety, were now rare. The court began to accept that James, a human soldier, was an essential presence in the nursery. Even those who had doubted him began to see the benefits of his calm, steady care. The Queen, observing from her throne, realized that this connection was more than a simple bond between child and caretaker. It was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of trust and understanding. She allowed herself a rare smile, watching as her daughter cooed happily in the arms of the human who had earned her confidence. By the end of the week, a routine had formed. James was always near, ready to comfort, protect, and guide the baby through her first days of life. The infant responded with laughter, curiosity, and trust. And in the quiet moments when the suns cast their soft light across the palace, the Queen felt a sense of hope. She did not yet know the full significance of this bond, but she understood one thing clearly. The human soldier had become an important part of her daughter's life, and perhaps in time a part of the life of her entire world. For James, the experience was humbling and inspiring. He had not come to Xylar to care for a child. Yet here he was, holding the future of an alien queen in his arms, and as he looked down at the infant, her tiny hand resting against his chest, he felt a quiet determination. He would protect her, guide her, and be the calm presence she needed no matter what challenges lay ahead. And so, the first true connection was made. A human soldier and the infant daughter of the alien queen had formed a bond that transcended worlds, species, and expectations. It was a small miracle, quiet yet powerful, and it was only the beginning of a story that would shape the future of the palace, the planet, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Days had passed since the human soldier James had first calmed the queen's daughter. In the palace, a quiet rhythm had settled in the nursery. James had become a constant presence there, gently holding the infant, singing softly, and guiding her through her first experiences with the world. The baby's cries had become rare, replaced by small coos and tiny smiles. The alien queen watched closely from her throne or from nearby corridors. Each day she observed James's care with growing curiosity. His patience was extraordinary, his calm presence unwavering, and his empathy seemed almost instinctive. It was unlike anything she had seen among her own kind. In her people, strength was measured by skill, command, and intellect. But James demonstrated another kind of strength, one that came quietly from understanding and care. Despite the peace in the nursery, not everyone in the court was pleased. Whispers traveled quietly through the palace halls. Some advisors questioned the queen's decision to allow a human so close to her child. They feared the influence he might have on the infant and, by extension, on the future of the throne. He is an outsider, one advisor whispered to another. How can we trust him with the child of the queen? What if he misleads her, or worse, changes her thinking as she grows? The other advisor frowned. Perhaps, but look at the child. She responds only to him. No one else can calm her. If the queen trusts him, perhaps we must as well. Even as these doubts simmered, James remained unaware of most of the gossip. His focus was entirely on the child, reading her expressions, learning her tiny gestures, and adjusting his care to meet her needs. One morning, the baby was unusually restless. She had slept well the night before, but now wriggled in her crib, fussing softly. James knelt beside her, his voice gentle. It's okay, little one. I'm right here. You don't need to cry. The baby's small hands reached toward him instinctively. He lifted her into his arms, holding her close to his chest. Immediately, her whimpers stopped. She pressed her tiny face against him, and he could feel her heartbeat slowly calming. The Queen entered the nursery at that moment, her presence quiet but commanding. She had been observing from a distance for several days, but she wanted to see this moment personally. The baby turned her head toward her mother, cooing softly, yet her grip on James's uniform remained firm. "It seems she prefers you over me," the Queen said, her voice soft but carrying a note of curiosity. James shook his head gently. "She doesn't prefer one over the other, Your Majesty. She just feels safe with me right now. She is still learning about the world. She will come to know and trust you in time." The Queen studied him, impressed by his careful words and calm demeanor. "You speak wisely for a human soldier. Perhaps humans possess patience that we have not understood." The days turned into weeks. James began to notice subtle changes in the infant's behavior. She responded to his voice and gestures before anyone else's. She recognized him instantly upon entering the room and reached toward him eagerly. When he held her, she seemed to explore the world with confidence, looking around and moving her tiny hands in curiosity. This bond did not go unnoticed. The court began to watch with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Some advisors saw the human's care as evidence of his skill and trustworthiness. Others, however, whispered of potential danger. One day, during a council meeting, a senior advisor voiced concern. "Your Majesty, we must consider the influence of this human. He is close to your daughter. Should he not be questioned? Observed more closely?" The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, her posture rigid. "You question him because he is human. You do not see what is evident. My child responds to him. She trusts him. That is more than any argument of protocol." The advisor bowed slightly. "Of course, Your Majesty. Yet some caution is necessary, for the future of the throne depends on her safety and guidance." The Queen remained silent for a moment, then spoke firmly. "The human will remain close to my child. His presence is not a threat. It is a gift. Observe, but do not interfere unnecessarily." Meanwhile, James continued to bond with the infant. He taught her small gestures like reaching for objects and recognizing his voice. He noticed that she responded to emotions more keenly than other children he had encountered. A gentle word from him could calm her instantly, while a loud noise or sudden movement could make her uneasy. He adapted carefully, learning her patterns and rhythms, always prioritizing her comfort. The infant began to show early signs of curiosity. She reached for the shimmering patterns on the palace walls, touching the glowing designs with fascination. James guided her hands gently, explaining the patterns in soft words. Though she could not understand language fully yet, her attention and focus showed a spark of intelligence. The Queen observed from nearby, fascinated. Her people valued intellect, skill, and control. Yet this child's intelligence seemed linked to her emotional responses, her ability to sense others' intentions, and James seemed uniquely capable of nurturing that connection. One afternoon, while James held the infant near a sunlit window, she suddenly began to coo and babble in her small alien language. Her tiny hands moved, pointing at objects in the distance. James smiled and mirrored her gestures, softly repeating sounds and words. The baby responded eagerly, imitating him. The Queen watched silently, her expression softening. It was then that she realized something remarkable. This human, through his care and attention, was helping her daughter learn about the world in ways no one else could. His patience, empathy, and calm presence were teaching her trust, confidence, and curiosity. The Queen felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect for him. Yet outside the nursery, the whispers of concern continued. Some advisors worried about the potential influence of humans on the royal family. Others debated whether the Queen's decision was wise, fearing that outsiders might have unknown intentions. Despite this, the Queen remained steadfast. She knew the truth. James had earned the trust of her child through compassion and skill, and that trust could not be forced or replicated. One evening, the baby became fussy, her tiny fists waving as she cried softly. James picked her up and held her close, rocking gently. "Shh, it's okay," he whispered. "I'm here. You're safe." The infant's cries softened, then stopped entirely. She pressed her small face against his chest, and he could feel her heartbeat gradually calming. The queen, observing from a nearby balcony, felt a sense of wonder. No one else could have done this. Only James could reach her child's heart. As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the palace, James and the infant remained together, a human and an alien child united in quiet trust. The queen watched them, reflecting on the unusual bond she had witnessed. It was not strength of arms nor power of command that had won this child's trust. It was empathy, patience, and understanding. The next morning, James continued his routine with the infant. He noticed her beginning to recognize patterns in her environment, her gestures more deliberate, her expressions more communicative. He encouraged her curiosity gently, showing her small toys, textures, and patterns within the nursery. Each time she reached for something new, he celebrated softly, reinforcing her sense of confidence. The queen observed from a distance, noting the rapid progress. Her advisors were silent, some in admiration, some in concern. They whispered among themselves, debating the implications of a human guiding the future of the royal heir. But the queen's mind was clear. She trusted James. She knew his intentions were pure, and she had seen the effect of his care on her daughter. More than that, she had begun to recognize the value of his presence, not just as a caretaker, but as a teacher, protector, and guide. By the end of the week, the palace had settled into a new rhythm. James remained close to the infant, responding to her every need with patience and calm. The baby had become calmer, more confident, and increasingly responsive to the world around her. And in quiet moments, when the suns cast soft light across the crystalline floors, the queen felt a deep sense of hope. She did not yet know how far this bond would go, nor how it would shape the future of her child and her people. But one thing was certain: the connection between a human soldier and her daughter was extraordinary, and it had begun to change the palace in ways she could not have imagined. And so the first signs of a true bond were clear. A bond that transcended worlds, species, and expectation, quietly building trust, understanding, and hope for a future filled with possibility. The palace had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of the infant's days, with James always nearby, holding and comforting the child. The queen observed from her throne, her eyes attentive, her mind calculating. She knew that threats in the galaxy were constant, and while she trusted James implicitly, she also understood that danger could arrive unexpectedly. Her concern proved justified. One morning, scouts reported movement near the outer borders of the planet. A rival faction seeking to challenge her rule had begun probing Xylar's defenses. The queen convened an urgent council to discuss the situation. Soldiers and advisors debated strategy, their voices tense but controlled. James, present as always near the nursery, listened quietly. He had been trained for combat and emergencies, yet the idea of danger so close to the queen's child filled him with a protective determination unlike any he had felt before. He knew that if the palace were attacked, the infant's safety would be his responsibility. The queen left the nursery reluctantly, her mind focused on the reports. She trusted her soldiers and defenses, but the unknown faction worried her. She gave instructions for increased security around the palace and the surrounding areas. Yet even as she planned, her thoughts returned constantly to her child. James was with the infant, and she felt a quiet relief that he was there, calm and vigilant. The day passed without incident, but as night fell, alarms echoed through the palace. Scouts had confirmed that the rival faction had deployed small ships approaching the planet's orbit. Their intentions were unclear, but the queen ordered immediate precautions. Gates were secured, forces mobilized, and communication channels opened to allies across the planet. James felt the tension rising. He carried the baby in his arms, moving quickly to a secure area near the nursery. The infant stirred, sensing the change in the air. James held her closer, speaking softly. "It's okay, little one. I'm here. You're safe with me." Her tiny fingers grasped his uniform, and she pressed her face to his chest. Her cries were soft now, not loud, as if she sensed the presence of danger but trusted that James would protect her. The queen returned briefly to the nursery, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "James," she said, her voice steady, "I must attend the council. I leave my daughter in your care. Protect her at all costs." James nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "I will not let anything happen to her, Your Majesty." he replied firmly. Hours passed. The sounds of distant engines and the movement of palace defenses filled the corridors. James kept the infant close, rocking her gently when she fussed, speaking quietly to calm her. The palace had become a mix of controlled chaos outside the nursery and quiet vigilance inside it. Suddenly, an alarm sounded louder than the others. Scouts reported that a small group of enemy operatives had landed on the palace grounds, attempting to infiltrate the outer gates. James felt a surge of urgency. He knew that the baby could not be left unprotected. He carefully wrapped her in a soft blanket and scanned the room for a safe escape route. The Queen's advisors had prepared an emergency passage, a hidden corridor beneath the palace, used only for situations like this. James carried the baby carefully, moving swiftly but quietly. His training guided him as he navigated the maze of halls, avoiding patrols and alarms. As he moved, the infant became fussy, sensing the urgency in his steps. James held her close, whispering softly, "I'm here, little one. We'll be safe soon. Trust me." Finally, he reached the entrance to the hidden passage. Guards stationed nearby nodded silently, recognizing him and understanding his purpose. James descended the narrow staircase, carrying the infant securely, feeling the weight of responsibility but also a sense of purpose he had never known before. The passage opened into a small, secure chamber. It was simple but safe, designed for emergencies. James set the baby down gently on a soft mat, her tiny eyes studying him. He knelt beside her, speaking softly. "You're safe now. No one can reach us here." The baby relaxed, her small hands reaching out for him. She cooed quietly, her trust in him evident. James smiled, feeling a deep connection. He had protected many in his life, but this, holding the child of an alien queen, keeping her safe in a world far from Earth, was something extraordinary. Outside, the palace defenses engaged the intruders. The queen coordinated her forces with skill and authority, sending reinforcements to repel the enemy. Sensors tracked every movement, and the battle was careful, calculated, and swift. Within the palace, James and the infant remained secure, the human soldier a silent guardian of the future queen. As hours passed, the immediate danger subsided. The enemy forces were repelled, and the palace grounds were secure once again. James remained with the baby, rocking her gently as she drifted into a peaceful sleep. Her small breaths were steady, and her tiny hands rested on his chest. The queen returned to the nursery, her face showing relief and pride. She studied James, observing the care and dedication he had shown. "You have protected her well," she said softly. "I see now that your presence is not just comforting. It is vital. She trusts you, and in that trust lies her safety." James nodded, still holding the infant carefully. "I will continue to protect her, Your Majesty. No harm will come to her while I am near." The queen stepped closer, her eyes thoughtful. "It is remarkable how a human, a being so different from my people, can possess such patience, courage, and understanding. You have proven that strength is not only in power or skill, but in empathy and care." James felt a sense of humility. He had trained for combat, for survival, for strategy. But never had he considered that his ability to stay calm, to be patient, and to care could be so important. Yet here, on this distant world, it was the quality that mattered most. Over the next several days, the palace resumed its normal activities, but a new awareness had formed among the staff and advisors. The human soldier was no longer just an observer or outsider. He was a guardian, a trusted presence, and a guide for the infant. Some still whispered doubts, but their voices were quieter, tempered by the visible effects of James's care. The infant herself seemed to grow more confident. She explored the safe areas of the secure chamber, reaching for small toys and textures, responding to James's gentle guidance. Her laughter and coos filled the room, a sign that trust and safety had taken root. One afternoon, as the suns cast their soft light across the crystalline floors of the palace, the queen visited the secure chamber once more. She watched quietly as James held the infant, showing her patterns in the light and responding to her gestures. The child laughed and reached for him, her eyes bright with recognition. "You have done more than I could have hoped," the queen said softly. "Not only have you protected her, but you have nurtured her, guided her, and allowed her to feel secure in this world." "It is a gift beyond measure," James smiled humbly. "I only do what is right. She trusts me, and that trust must be protected. I will continue to do so no matter what comes." The queen studied him, realizing the truth of his words. Trust was a rare and precious thing, especially in a world filled with danger and political intrigue. The infant's bond with James was extraordinary, and it had already begun to shape the environment around her. As night fell, the palace was calm once more. The enemy had been repelled, and the infant slept peacefully in James's arms. The queen, standing quietly in the doorway, felt a sense of hope and gratitude. She knew that the human soldier had become more than a protector. He had become an essential part of her daughter's life, a presence that would shape her growth and security in ways no one else could. James, holding the sleeping infant, reflected on the events of the past days. He had faced danger, uncertainty, and challenges he could never have imagined. Yet through it all, he had discovered a new purpose: the quiet, steadfast protection of life, trust, and innocence. The infant's peace, her laughter, and her growing confidence were proof that even in a galaxy filled with conflict, care and empathy could make a profound difference, and so, the bond between the human soldier and the queen's child deepened further. It was a bond built on trust, courage, and understanding, one that would endure through the trials ahead, shaping the future of the palace, the infant, and the world around them. For James, the experience was more than duty. It was a revelation. Strength was not only in arms or strategy, but in patience, care, and the ability to calm fear in the smallest hearts. And as he held the child close, he knew that together, they could face whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. The days after the attempted attack passed quietly, though the palace remained vigilant. Guards patrolled the halls with careful attention, and security measures had been strengthened. Yet within the nursery, peace had returned. The infant, once fussy and restless, now smiled and cooed happily, her tiny hands reaching for James as soon as he entered the room. James had settled into a careful routine. He carried the child, sang soft songs, and introduced her gently to her surroundings. He noticed small changes every day. She was learning to reach for objects, recognize patterns, and respond to his voice. Each new gesture, each laugh or smile filled him with pride and a deep sense of responsibility. The queen observed quietly from a distance, her eyes reflecting both relief and admiration. Her child was safe, secure, and learning in ways she had never imagined. James had become more than a protector. He was a guide, a teacher, and a source of comfort. One afternoon, the queen entered the nursery as James held the infant near a sunlit window. Light danced across the crystalline floors, casting gentle reflections on the walls. The baby's eyes followed the patterns of light, reaching out with tiny hands. James encouraged her softly, guiding her movements, speaking gently. "She is learning quickly," the queen remarked, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "Your care has made her confident, curious, and happy. I have never seen her like this before." James glanced at her, careful to remain humble. "She responds to kindness, Your Majesty. She feels safe, and when she trusts, she learns. That is all I have done. Keep her safe and calm." The queen studied him closely. "It is more than that. You have shown patience, understanding, and courage. Even when the palace faced danger, you remained steady. That is a rare quality. My people value strength, but you have shown me that true strength is also in care and empathy." James nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "I have learned from her as well, Your Majesty. She teaches me patience, joy, and the importance of trust. I will continue to care for her always." The queen allowed herself a small, rare smile. She had faced many challenges as a ruler, but this was different. The bond between her child and a human soldier had created something extraordinary. It was not just protection. It was trust, understanding, and a connection that transcended worlds. In the days that followed, the palace staff and advisors began to accept this reality. The infant's confidence and calm demeanor spoke louder than any argument. Even those who had doubted James's presence could not ignore the results. The child was thriving, learning, and smiling, a living testament to the care he provided. One morning, a group of ambassadors from nearby planets arrived to discuss trade and alliances. They were greeted by the queen in her throne room, but their attention quickly turned to the nursery when news of the human's connection with the infant spread. Whispers of amazement filled the air as they observed James holding the child, guiding her tiny hands and speaking softly. An ambassador, unable to hide his curiosity, asked, "Your Majesty, how is it that a human has earned the trust of your daughter so quickly?" "I have never seen anything like this." The queen's eyes softened. "It is not only trust but understanding. He does not simply protect her, he guides her, teaches her, and makes her feel safe. His presence calms her, and in that calm she grows. It is rare to see such a bond between species, yet here it is. The ambassadors nodded, impressed and respectful. They saw not only the infant's well-being, but also the strength of the human's character. Word of James's care spread quickly, earning admiration and respect from all who visited the palace. Meanwhile, the infant continued to thrive. She explored small areas under James's watchful eye, reaching for toys, textures, and patterns. Her laughter filled the nursery, a joyful sound that echoed through the palace halls. She had begun to recognize the faces of palace staff, but her first and strongest bond remained with James. The Queen watched this development with quiet satisfaction. She understood that the human had not only protected her child during moments of danger, but had also nurtured her growth in ways that her people could not. She felt a deep respect for him and a growing sense of gratitude. One evening, as the sun set, casting golden light across the palace, James held the infant in his arms, singing softly. She rested her tiny head against his chest, her small hands clutching his uniform. The Queen approached, standing quietly at the doorway. "You have given her more than safety," she said softly. "You have given her trust, confidence, and happiness. For that I'm grateful." James glanced at her, speaking honestly. "It is my honor, Your Majesty. I only wish to protect her and help her grow. Nothing more is needed." The Queen studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. But know this, your presence here is invaluable. My child's well-being depends on the bond you have formed. That bond will shape not only her future but the future of my people." James felt the weight of her words, but also a quiet reassurance. He had been far from Earth, facing unknown worlds and challenges, but he had found purpose in caring for a child who trusted him completely. It was a role that demanded courage, patience, and empathy, and he was ready to meet it every day. In the following weeks, the infant's development continued at a remarkable pace. She laughed freely, reached for objects with growing skill, and responded eagerly to James's voice. The palace staff, once skeptical, now saw him as essential to her growth. The Queen's advisors acknowledged that his presence was not only beneficial, but necessary for her child's well-being. One morning, the infant reached for a small toy, her tiny fingers grasping it carefully. James guided her hand gently, praising her softly. The baby cooed, her eyes bright with joy, and she turned to him, pressing her small face against his chest. The Queen observed quietly from a distance, her heart filled with admiration. She realized that the human had done more than protect her child. He had nurtured her trust, curiosity, and intelligence. The infant's bond with James was profound, and it would continue to shape her life in ways that could not yet be measured. Over time, the Queen began to speak openly of James's importance. She praised his patience, care, and courage, sharing with her people the extraordinary bond that had formed. The story of a human calming and guiding her daughter spread throughout the palace and beyond, inspiring admiration and respect for his character. James, however, remained humble. He continued his care quietly, focused on the infant's needs. He sang softly, guided her small hands, and responded patiently to her moods. His dedication never wavered, and the infant's trust in him grew stronger each day. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, the Queen entered the nursery once more. She watched quietly as James held the infant, her small hands reaching for his face, her eyes bright and joyful. "You have done more than I could have hoped," she said softly. "You have not only protected her but nurtured her. You have given her trust, confidence, and happiness. That is a gift beyond measure." James smiled humbly. "I only do what is right. She trusts me, and that trust must be protected. I will continue to do so, no matter what comes." The Queen stepped closer, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Your presence has shown me that true strength is not only in power or skill, but in patience, care, and understanding. You have shaped my child's world in ways that words cannot describe." James felt a quiet pride and responsibility. He had discovered a new purpose far from Earth, the protection, care, and guidance of a life entrusted to him. And in doing so, he had created a bond that transcended worlds, species, and expectation. The infant, now smiling and cooing in his arms, represented more than just the Queen's lineage. She symbolized trust, hope, and the extraordinary connection between human and alien. Through his care, she had learned to feel safe, confident, and curious. And through her trust, James had discovered a strength within himself that he had never known before. The Queen watched them together, a sense of peace settling over her. She knew that the human soldier had become an essential part of her child's life. His presence would continue to shape her growth, her understanding of the world, and the bonds she would form with her people. And so, life in the palace continued. The infant thrived under James's care, her laughter and curiosity filling the halls. The Queen observed with quiet admiration, knowing that the bond between her child and the human soldier was extraordinary, rare, and vital. It was a connection built on trust, care, and understanding, a bond that would endure, shaping the future of the palace, the child, and the world beyond. For James, the journey had revealed a truth he could not have imagined. True strength was found not only in skill or bravery, but in the ability to nurture, to protect, and to inspire trust in the smallest and most vulnerable hearts. And as he held the infant close, he knew that together, they would face whatever challenges the galaxy might bring, with courage, patience, and an unbreakable bond of trust. The palace, once tense and uncertain, now thrived in quiet harmony. And within the nursery, the baby slept peacefully in the arms of the human soldier who had earned her trust, her laughter waiting to greet each new day, and her future bright with possibility.